trust is a very powerful thing, but trust on its own doesn't grow a business. A lot of brands spend a lot of time trying to build up consumer trust and trying to kind of safeguard their social media accounts so that they educate well and they show up consistently. They want to build up that credibility, but they're afraid that if they go one step further, that if they try to make an ask or make a sell, that's going to hurt trust. And so then they hesitate. They flat out don't have a clear call to action. They don't ask for that next step. And so if you have found yourself in a place where your audience likes you, but they don't take action, then this episode is for you. Because today we're going to talk about how to invite action without losing trust, and really why clarity is kind of the bridge between the two. So this is Marketing on Point. And in this episode, we are talking about building a momentum by building trust.
Welcome to Marketing on Point, the podcast where strategy meets clarity. Every episode, we break down real-world strategies, stories, and impactful tactics to help you grow your brand. Let's dive in.
Here's where most brands get stuck. They believe that trust and action are opposites. They think that if you push your audience too hard or if you ask too much of the people who follow you, that's going to undo all of the goodwill that they've built and people are just going to bounce and run the opposite direction. I actually had a client one time who they believed that they were putting out daily content for people to consume, but they were only sending out an e-blast once every month. And there was even conversation of if that was too much. Whereas if you're putting out daily content, then you need to be putting out at least weekly newsletters. And I feel like a lot of people would argue, and I would probably be one of them, you should actually be putting out daily e-blasts if your content is meant to be engaged with daily. But they were too afraid that if they sent out something every single day, that was going to encourage people to unsubscribe, and therefore that they were going to run away. But the opposite really was true of, yes, you're going to get some unsubscribes, but the people who are constantly engaging with you and that they're constantly opening up that email list and that you are constantly showing up in their inbox, you are so much more likely to actually engage those people and actually to guide them in meaningful interactions. But that client, they were just too afraid that they were going to step on that trust, that they were going to break that trust with the client or with their audience because they were afraid that too much communication was going to hurt that relationship. Instead of that client being able to guide their audience into how their product was going to benefit their audience's life, they stalled out. Instead of inviting that audience into really meaningful interactions, they just kind of hinted around the point. They kind of beat around the bush. And all that did was, instead of causing momentum, it really just kind of, it got them some compliments. It got them some, oh, this is good content, or, oh, we love this. But it didn't really build the brand. It didn't actually propel anything forward meaningfully. There definitely wasn't a lot of movement or momentum that was built. And the issue is that when you think about your audience, when you think about the people who you are trying to reach and you're trying to meet, you want to make it as frictionless for them to say yes to whatever you ultimately want them to do. Let's say you want them to buy a product on your website, or you want them to purchase a ticket to an event, or you want them to listen to a song. Whatever that thing is, you want it to be as frictionless as possible, and you want it to be as clear as possible that people know what to do next. The problem becomes when people don't know what to do next, or it's fuzzy on what they should be doing. Because people only take action when that next step is very obvious and it also feels safe. I mean, think about it in your own circumstances. Think about the best experiences that you've had as a customer. I bet that you weren't just being constantly convinced, you were more so being guided. You weren't just said one time, hey, here's this thing, and then they walked away. More likely than not, you saw it once and then you interacted with it and then you wanted to find out more. And then it just kind of grew into this natural organic relationship. No relationship is going to grow if there's not actually you sowing a seed into that user's life. I mean, think about it as a friendship. If you just saw someone randomly on the side of the road and you were like, hey, how are you doing, as you pass them by on the sidewalk, you probably aren't going to ever talk to that person again. But if you say, hey, how are you doing? And then you strike up a conversation with them and you somehow find some common themes and some common elements, then you might start to build a relationship. And then that might progress and that might grow. But if someone doesn't understand what you are trying to say, if they don't understand how your service or your product or your brand fits into their life, they're not gonna take action. If they don't have a clear path forward, they're not gonna take action. That is what effective marketing does, is it makes it so obvious of here's the action you need to take, and here is how this product or this service or this brand fits into your life, and it invites that person into the story. Research from Nielsen shows that consumers are far more likely to act when messaging feels helpful and relevant rather than just promotional. People want something that tells an important story, and not just something that feels like hype, not something that just feels like fluff or any of that. It really comes down to alignment and how you are guiding someone through that journey. And so this is why what are called calls to action, or CTAs, really matter the most, and matter a lot more than a lot of brands realize. If you have a weak call to action and it feels too gentle or it feels too confusing, then you're probably not going to get a lot of traction. Some weak call to actions, they might be, let us know if you need anything, or hey, check us out, or if you're interested, DM us. Those really aren't invitations into a conversation. Those aren't invitations into something meaningful. It's more of just dead ends. Strong call to actions, a lot of people get it wrong. They think that a strong call to action is really pushy, but pushy is different than what you want. What you want is clarifying. You want to clarify, here's what to do next. You want to invite someone into a relationship, into a conversation. So a good call to action might be, here's what to do if this resonated with you. Or here's how we can help if this is the problem you're facing. Or here's the next step when you're ready. That language not only honors the trust that you've built up and the brand equity that you've built up, but it also shifts everything so that there actually is a meaningful path forward for the person on the other side of the screen. An action, I don't think necessarily always has to mean purchase. Sometimes you want people to take action by saving a post or replying to an email or even just simply booking a call. You could even just flat out just say, hey, here is the problem that my brand or my product or my service is trying to solve. Can we acknowledge, or will you acknowledge that this is a problem? So there's a lot of call to actions that can be very strong and continue the narrative and continue the dialogue forward, that don't have to just push a sell, that don't have to feel super pushy or super kind of like markety, so to speak. But if every piece of content is trying to just sell, that's when it becomes aggressive. That's when it feels like, ooh, this is sticky. Ooh, that's when you start to break the trust. But if your content gradually moves people closer to the ultimate goal that you want them to have, that is when it's going to feel natural. That action feels very frictionless and very easy. HubSpot actually found that if a brand has a very clear and intentional call to action, they're going to see significantly higher conversion rates than brands that leave things very ambiguous. I don't think that this is very surprising. And again, I don't think that people and users and audiences, they don't mind being guided. They honestly don't even mind kind of being pushed in a certain direction. They just want to do it in a natural, organic, flowing way that actually benefits their life, rather than just feeling like, hey, constant push. That's the fine line. And that's what, as marketers, we have to figure out of how do we actually enrich a person's life? How do we actually engage a person's life? How do we actually bring a more positive outcome into a person's life, rather than just pushing and just selling for the sake of pushing and selling? So let's make this practical. I want you to go and look at the last 5 pieces of content. If you remember in the last episode, we kind of did an audit already. So you may already have that pulled up. Ask yourself one question. What action was this inviting? If the answer is nothing specific, then you have a gap. And the next thing that I want you to do is a little bit more of an important part. The action should also match the trust level that you've built up. I think when you've put in the work and you have a high trust piece of content, you can invite bigger steps. If you've not spent a lot of time building up that trust, then the content should invite smaller ones. What I mean by that is a first-time viewer shouldn't necessarily be asked to purchase something. It should more so be that they're probably invited to engage. Once your audience or once a user is more warm, then there shouldn't be guessing of what is next in that journey, what is next in that path. Make it very clear of here is the next step forward. And so as you build that trust, as you build that alignment, you are constantly inviting people into action. You're constantly inviting people into deeper conversations. And that's when it doesn't feel like selling. It more so feels like progress, but it's progress towards building your business, building your whatever that is that you are trying to market. Once you start to achieve that, and once you start to unlock that, that's where momentum really begins. Because once people take one step, they're more likely to take the next, and then the next, and then the next. Engagement truly does compound. Confidence builds once you've started to lay the groundwork, and once you've started to build that trust. That's when relationships deepen. Do you kind of see where we're getting at? It's really that action that you do as a marketer, as a brand, to lay the conversation out there, to build that relationship, and really to invite your people to take action. And honestly, at the end of the day, that action is an expression of the trust that you've built up. So if your marketing really has felt stuck between people just like us as a brand, and people versus people want to work with us, and people are really coming along for the journey with us, then it's probably the bridge that you've been missing. Is you've been either asking too big of questions when you haven't spent the time building that trust, or you haven't clearly been guiding people through the journey to again, build up that trust. So that's my encouragement to you today, is build that trust. Find ways to invite people into the conversation, find ways to insert yourself into their life and actually benefit their life. And that is going to then lead to more momentum, more traction gained. That's all I have for you today. I want to thank you so much for listening to Marketing on Point, and I'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to Marketing on Point. This podcast is all about helping you show up with clarity, connect with the right audience, and build a brand that actually grows. It's brought to you by Wander Creative, your full service partner for strategy, content, and execution that moves people. If this episode helped you think differently, Do us a favor, subscribe, share it with a friend, and leave a quick review. It helps more people discover the show and build brands that actually make an impact. We'll see you next time.